So, welcome. Pretty often, we humans are too tightly coupled with what's on our minds. That means we are fused with our thoughts and with our assumptions on our minds. It also means that we pretty often evaluate our experience all the time. We avoid certain situations or other experiences. Maybe you know the classic, we don't have conflict here. And also we do lots of reason giving for our own behavior. That's all very human. Wouldn't it be nice if we could just accept our thoughts and emotions, then choose a valued direction, intentionally of course, do that together as a group or as a team, because we often are in business working together, and then take action, again, intentionally. Well, it's not either or. We have to deal with both, with fear and with action, because we are all humans. And if you've been here at BaselOne 2 years ago, like me, you might remember my tangible but very rough concept of what's being a human in tech and then also beyond. We have the head, we have the thinking, we have the heart, we have the emotions, and we have our guts, so kind of intuition and gut feeling. Yeah, so the human in front of you is me. Hello, I'm Cosima. I use pronouns she, her, and I'm a long-term traveler in the world of IT. Today, I mainly work with systems. That means teams, groups, parts of organizations, and the individuals in these systems, the human beings like you and me, who form and who create and who develop these systems. And today, in the next 30 to 35 minutes, I will focus with you on psychological flexibility, which is not to confuse with psychological safety, which is way more popular in our realm already. Yet in my experience, psychological flexibility is still too little known, especially in our tech and product and business-focused world in organizations. Yet it's a huge lever for better performance, for example, for more resiliency, be that as a system, but also individually for us humans. So it's a better, huge lever for better performance in many areas, be that us people, be that our tech work, or the business we do. Psychological flexibility is something that everyone here in the room and beyond already has. You can imagine it like sort of an ancient temple that contains of several pillars. So I drew a very simplified one here. And the central pillar of psychological flexibility, the central component, is awareness. You can also develop the psychological flexibility. It's like a mental muscle training. And you can imagine it like training your physical muscles. So I don't need to train all my muscles all the time I train, yet I should focus on all the muscles somehow so that I have, for example, no back pain, I can lift stuff, I have a healthy balance in my body. And the same with the components of psychological flexibility. All are important, yet we don't need to train or pay attention to every component all the time. And I will be getting to the other two components in a bit. One thing you need to know beforehand, so maybe you want to leave, but you need to know that this talk also contains homework. You might now find maybe your mind already busy with meaning making of the term homework. Thoughts could range from, what the heck, we're not in school anymore, to, oh, additional value, and every thought in between. So in all seriousness, here's what I mean with the term homework today. So this talk contains a lot of, so to say, training theory, how to train your mental muscles. and also some exercises. And I could talk a lot to you how to train your muscles, but you won't get stronger of that. So you will get an inspiration and hopefully some ideas to start, and hopefully also motivation to start with the exercises, but you need to exercise for your own. And this is why you'll get all the stuff on my website where you can access it, where you have some templates. I even started some German YouTube videos on that, where you can go deeper, because it's all about training. It's not just training theory and thinking about it, but also starting to apply it and also experiment with it. So here's the invite to get that afterwards, and I will also show you the code for my website afterwards. Now, after the first bit of, so to say, training theory, how do we humans create meaning? Here's another example, architecture. What is architecture anyway? So my partner works in healthcare, and when we met and I talked about my job and architects, he was thinking of the picture on the left-hand side, like, of course, building architects. I wasn't aware of that when I'm talking about architecture and architects, I mean usually system architecture, software architects. So maybe a concept that's more relatable to you and also to me is the comic strip on the other side of the slide, like depicting a very brittle and fragile architecture. Another example of meaning making, agility. What is agility in our field? And I'm not talking about jumping dogs or outdoor sports, not that kind of agility. For some, it's co-creation or delivering value sooner, even sooner. For others, it's rigid processes, Scrum by the book, for example, features only, or even pressure from the management to produce features and more features following rigid processes. So I'm exaggerating a bit here. So we can get caught in dark thoughts, so to say, when we are in the process of meaning making. And we humans view the world through kind of imaginary triangles of meaning, like this little emoji in the middle of the slide. And these triangles form kind of webs, relationship webs or spider webs, so to say. And we see the world through these relationship webs. And from time to time, that's very human, we fully identify with our webs of meaning and we get caught in them. Instead of being just aware of them, like, oh, that's what my brain created. One last example of meaning making, a lemon. A lemon is way more tangible than agility or architecture. I can go to a shop and buy a lemon. And no matter how tangible terms and concepts are, our brain are meaning-making machines. We do that all the time. So when I say lemon, my brain, for example, brings up Italy holiday because we were in Italy at some point in time when I was small, and there were lemons. And of course, most of us have kind of a relation to lemon and sour because it's a sour fruit. And we do that all the time, the meaning-making. We start this when we are learning the language of our origin, of our upbringing. And you might have different relations maybe to a lemon than the ones I painted of my brain. Overall, we humans, we create meaning like these triangles of meaning. And the theory behind is called relational frame theory. It's a theory of language and cognition, like cognition of our brain. And it's rooted in behavioral science. So there could be whole talks and even you can study the whole field. So this is just a very, very, very nutshell introduction. And we relate concepts to each other in that theory. We relate sensory data, what we see, what we feel, what we sense, thoughts, emotions, words. And these all form bidirectional relations. So when I say sour, my brain might pretty quickly produce lemon. Maybe not so fast, melon, for example. And we start seeing the world through these relationships, through these triangles of meaning. So the most important bit for you to take away here is we cannot delete thoughts. from these networks of meaning. So these networks keep growing over our time span of life. We only can practice. We can practice a helpful distance from time to time. So in a nutshell, our main goal is to deliberately be able to step out of our own spider webs of meaning from time to time that we have in our minds and that keep growing and growing. And learning such practices to deliberately step back from time to time helps us grow these mental muscles. And we already saw that awareness is the central component, the central pillar of this mental muscle called psychological flexibility. Now I want to dive a little more with you into reflection at work, because this is a software conference and we usually, of course, do also maybe software stuff in our free time, but we'd also do it for work. Reflection at work, also known as like juggling and balancing this fear part and this action parts we saw in the very beginning of this talk. Because no matter which role you have or where you work, I think with a bit of work and life experience, everybody of us will know that things will get rough from time to time at work. And what kind of rough is that rough? Good indicators for you that it gets rough is when you notice more of this fear acronym. When we notice we are fused with our thoughts or with our assumptions, meaning too tightly coupled, we're going round and round in our thoughts, or we just see one option or one alternative, or we start being avoidant of other views or perspectives. When we evaluate our experience all the time and are going round and round like in a hamster wheel, or we are dismissing other things pretty quickly. When we avoid certain situations, I already said it, we don't have conflict here, for example, or avoiding talking, for example, to a business department or to managers or to other folks, no matter to whom. And more of reason giving, if we start giving reasons and coming up with more and more reasons, for example. Maybe you know that we don't have time for a retrospective because we have so much work to do. So this is also could be an indicator. These are good indicators that it gets rough. And one given is that our attention is a limited resource, also at work, of course. We pay attention, and also we pay with our attention, which is a nice wordplay, but it's really we pay with our attention as with the brain power, kind of, so to say, that we have. And this cannot be said often enough. So to make action, instead of the fear, more likely, so we have to juggle both, but we want to have a little more of the action than the fear. So to accept our thoughts, no matter which kind of thoughts we have, and to accept also our emotions, even in the business world, then choose a valued direction where to head to, and then also take action, not just think about it, but also do something. In order to do that, the very first and very essential mind skill is reducing distractions. And that might sound almost too obvious, even trivial. One option to do so is to switch off your notifications, at least from time to time. So switching off notifications on our digital devices. I have so often a call with one-on-one folks or with a team where stuff keeps popping up. So to really guard our attention and also to reduce the distractions we have, at least from time to time, is the number one mind skill. Here's one reading recommendation of a colleague in our field, of Gernot Starke, who wrote a very popular article on that in the IT field a couple of time ago. So if you want to read more on that, I can really recommend that. Another option is, that could be a bit harder for some, but for others it could be easier than switching off your Slack and your Teams and your email and all the notifications, is to deliberately pause each day for full 5 minutes. And if 5 minutes sound too much, then take 3. But deliberately pause. You could, for example, use your senses. You could focus on one sense, like looking around or hearing like noises around you, like birds or like cars, even in a city, focusing on one sense, or looking outside, going outside. And if all that seems impossible to you, you could, for example, use the feet we usually have on the ground. If we stand or if we sit, we can sense in there, or having a cup of coffee or tea, or even if we don't have time for that, going to the bathroom is something we always do during a day. We can put our hand on the doorknob and just take the moment, oh, how does that feel? This is just one, maybe 30 seconds of attention, of deliberately pausing. I brought more mind skills for you that you can take with you and try out to grow psychological flexibility even more. I will walk you through the next 3 with a toolkit that I developed, and I call it the reflection canvas. Why is it a useful tool? We already saw that reflection is an essential skill because it helps us to get from the one side to see our meaning making and see only our meaning making and the webs of meaning making we have, and also being potentially entangled with our thoughts, like being very narrow and just seeing our world, to being potentially aware and also potentially changeable and see just, oh, that's the creation of my brain, that's my view, and I'm open to other views, for example. Some expectation management up front, so it's not always so straightforward like the middle arrow depicts. Usually the way from being entangled in our own spiderwebs of thoughts and past experiences to, whoa, my brain created that. It's just a creation of my brain, and I'm open to listen to other solutions and to work together and to create something even better, is usually not so straightforward. It needs practice. And even if we practice, sometimes we also get entangled. That's very human. The reflection canvas can help us to practice exactly that. And usually you use it with kind of a challenging situation or a rough situation, like I said before, or with a repeating pattern if you have something that nudges you or that you don't like, that you are not content with, that you would like to improve, and that keeps on coming back again and again. The reflection canvas is kind of a one-page paper exercise, but you can also do it, of course, digitally, and with a bit of practice, you can even use it partially in your brain or in your mind, for example, when you need it. So basically, it's divided in 3 sections. We want to get from the one side, being aware of our spiderwebs of meaning, to better decisions and better choices. And we do that by separating our observations, what is kind of reality, from our judgments, because we keep judging all the time, we are humans. Second step is that we are building our emotional literacy, because we have emotions all the time. Sometimes we have a better access to them, sometimes not, but they are there. So we leverage that as well. And the third step is pausing our urge to intervene, because usually we are pretty quick in doing something, and we are even usually paid for doing stuff and not for thinking about stuff, but also getting stuff rolling. But here it's a little moment to pause. It works best in a written way, so when you start with it and try it for a regular practice, write it down. Doesn't need to be much, but write down things for these 3 steps, and afterwards you can also use it maybe in your mind if you need be. So here's the first piece of homework. So in the slide deck and also in the cheat sheet on my webpage, you get all these questions and even some more guiding questions that help you to navigate through these 3 fields. Powerful questions that help you with the separating of the observations from the judgments, from the assumptions. Also building your emotional literacy. How do you find that challenging situations? What emotions are there? And then also the pausing to find more options, more choices, so that you can make a better choice or also decide that you do it like you always did it. That's always the freedom we have. So now we already saw 2 solid mind skills. 2 solid mind skills that you can start with individually. So 2 kind of brain exercises to build this psychological flexibility muscles. Now is a good time to dive a little deeper into the second bit of, so to say, training theory, psychological theory, and talk about the other components of psychological flexibility. Remember this muscle training metaphor. We all have already psychological flexibility, even if we don't know about the concept and the word. And we all can develop it further. We all can grow it. And also we need to develop and grow it. It doesn't happen by magic. It happens when we focus on one or more of these psychological flexibility components. And this is very boiled down, but also you will see in the next slides that it's kind of also pretty actionable and that you can link everyday things to it as well. So we need to focus on awareness. We also need to focus on authentic actions, of course, because awareness is nothing without actions. And this also needs adaptability from time to time. You can even think about it like this kind of magical quality triangle, like cost, scope, and time. All are somehow important, all need to be balanced, but we cannot always achieve everything all together in the same pace and in the same quality. Going a little deeper, awareness, the central pillar of the psychological flexibility. It's anchored, so to say, in the present moment. It's pretty simple to train because we have plenty of possibilities of being in the present moment. So I'm standing right now here, and I'm standing and breathing, and I'm not so much nervous than, for example, 5 minutes ago, for example. But if you ever have tried mindfulness, anybody in the room who has tried mindfulness exercises? Some folks. If you ever tried it, you might know that it's not that trivial or easy to be just in the present moment. If you noticed, I just said I'm not that nervous than like 5 minutes ago, for example. So being just in the present moment isn't that easy, but it can be also trained. The second pillar, authentic actions, is more rooted in the future because actions can only happen or influence our future and the future, for example, of your team or of your company. So it's about doing what matters. Doing what matters to us, to you, to yourself, for example, even though if we experience as a human being difficult or unhelpful thoughts, like the stuff that happens in our brains, or moods or emotions, which are usually resulting from interaction with other human beings. That's pretty normal. And this, so to say unhelpful stuff in our minds is a very human condition. But most of the time we can learn to deal more skillfully with that unhelpful stuff that clogs our processor in the brain, for example. And that's where adaptability comes into play, which is more rooted in the past. It has a lot to do with handling this unhelpful stuff in our brains. Staying adaptable is important, especially in our today's busy and also in our business world. For me, the terms change willingness and change capacity are even more tangible than adaptability. So, for example, is here somebody in the room who has ever tried to build a new habit during a stressful time? For example, trying to eat healthier when you learn for an exam or do more sports when you are a fully new parent. Anybody tried that? Yes? Was it successful to try a new habit in a stressful time? Yeah, I had the same experience. So you can be willing to change something, so that's the point here, but your capacity is sometimes limited. When we have more stress, and we have some stress in our life sometimes, then we might be willing to change, but we don't have capacity. And sometimes this is even true in organizations. People might be willing to change, but sometimes there's no capacity to change anymore because there's so much change, for example, or other stuff going on. So the third component of psychological flexibility, practicing that, is about this adaptability. So there are lots of days and lots of everyday enemies that can get in our way. It's not that rosy that we just need to pay attention to these components and it all gets like we are happy, we are healthy, business is running well. No, usually we have like busyness, we have complaining folks. Sometimes there's finger pointing, for example, the others did that or didn't do that. We have hidden conflicts, we have judgments in our minds, we have voiced judgments, and many, many more. Stress is also some of these everyday enemies. Too much work, for example, too much on our plates. And most of these relate to the FEAR acronym I showed already a few times, like being fused with our thoughts, avoiding stuff, evaluating stuff, and also reason giving. They are all very human. But most of these everyday enemies, at least in our realms of our human being, so to say, can be addressed when we practice our mental muscles. And for that, we can develop a good foundation. Foundation, like I show you on the slide, that is something that can be already worked on. So for example, reflection at work even, like retrospectives, but also reflecting on your work, for example, or with colleagues. Mindfulness skills, these are not a silver bullet, but for many of us they work pretty well, for others they don't. But this is one of the part of the foundation that you can use to develop psychological flexibility. Another part of the foundation is working with and on our values. And when I say working with values, I'm not talking about the values that are sometimes found on company walls. These are also important, of course, because we also need to talk about which values do we want to live together and run our organization together. Sometimes they work well because everybody knows what they mean and everybody's aligned and also finds themselves. That's a good idea. But sometimes also there's a clash, for example, or they are just words and concepts on the wall. Then this could be also a source where conflict arises. So working with values in that section is more starting with your own values, being aware of what's important to you, and then having a basis to see, is that maybe something that contributes to a conflict or to stress or to something that you would like to change or not? Sometimes there's nothing to change. That's also fine. And the third part of the foundation is working with our language and sometimes also with metaphors that makes it easier to grasp, for example, like intangible concepts. Sometimes it's easier to find a good metaphor to talk, like muscle training as a metaphor, for example, to train your psychological flexibility, makes it easier to access and to talk about. And also, this is something that works for many, but not for everybody. So, these foundational skills, it could be that they sound still pretty abstract to you, almost like another list of buzzwords, right? And therefore, we have the mind skills, the tools, the different brain exercises, where I showed you already 2 of them, like reducing distractions, which is pretty simple, but not always that easy to implement, and the reflection canvas, the separating your observations from the judgments when you have a tough situation, building your emotional literacy, and then generate options for a better action or for more authentic action. And in the following part, I will introduce you to 2 more mind skills today that you can also use as a group of people or as a team. So who here in the room has ever found themselves in a rough or tough situation at work where a different perspective would have helped a lot in retrospection? Some hands, So I brought 2 examples. Tough situations, for example, I hear often or I see often when I work with teams and organizations, and also when I'm working with individuals sometimes, is like, it feels like I'm drowning in work. Or I can't see the forest for the trees anymore. And another tough or rough situation I brought as an example is that I see especially technical leaders frequently face is, I called it, those messy humans again. And this is not something that people say actually, but it usually comes more in a flavor of, I just wanted to quickly discuss, for example, that concept or that thing to decide, and then the whole thing blew up. We needed more time, we needed more effort, we needed more energy, people didn't engage maybe, we didn't reach a decision at all, going round and round. So this is also something that frequently happens. And there can be many more. Maybe you have also examples in your mind of a tough and rough situation. A first vital step when we face such a situation, a first vital step in changing the perspective is already get all the stuff that's on your brain, on your mental list, out of your brain. Start visualizing it. And in that example, I just wrote down some things that people tell me then about. One idea, one post-it. One idea, one bullet point, wherever you note it down. Especially, for example, when you're drowning at work. Or when you have that repeating pattern that, oh, those messy humans again, that situation again, and I cannot move forward. Writing things down is another powerful mind skill that might seem almost too trivial. One technique that helps with visualizing the stuff is the circle of influence. Anybody already heard of that concept or used it? Yeah, some folks. Yeah. So I learned that it even is that old that it comes from Stoicism, but Stephen Covey made it more popular in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So in a nutshell, we have the circle of control, what we can control. For example, you and me, everybody of us, we can control. Then the next circle, what we can influence, where we can poke somebody or have a say somewhere or are invited somewhere that we can have some sort of influence. And the third one is what concerns us, what's still having an impact to us, but where we cannot have an influence right now. And everything beyond is the soup or whatever's out there. In a nutshell, the circle of influence helps us to gain clarity and focus when we visualize and prioritize our stuff with that structure. So we can get stuff out of our mind and put it in that structure. What usually happens then is that I see people when they put out the stuff from their brain on pieces of paper and start putting it somewhere in the circle of control, the circle of influence, and the circle of concern, that they notice that they have more stuff in their circle of control than they thought. And also, oftentimes, the circle of influence grows bigger over time. So that means they are usually getting less concerns, less, for example, that losing sight or feeling like drowning. So overall, this is not something that always happens, but usually it happens when you start using these tools for a certain category of problems. So visualization in general, and particularly using the circle of influence as a third mind skill, is something that you can do for your own, of course, but also with your team. So if you have that in your team or in a group of people, for example, in a group of software architects or some sort of community of practice where you have a repeating pattern that you would like to work on, using the circle of influence with visualization of the challenges is a good mind skill that you can use together. And now in the final part, I would like to introduce you to the fourth mind skill I brought for today. So another canvas-like exercise, which I called the change of perspectives, which brings together all these three components, all these three aspects of psychological flexibility. And for that, I want you to briefly imagine all the challenges that I brought for these example situations just a few slides ago. All these things on these little digital post-its, and there could be even more. If we have now already written these things down and then sorted it into the circle of influence I showed you as a third mind skill, and we already gained some clarity by putting them in what's in our control, what's in our influence, and what's in our concern. Now a good piece of advice is when you work with that tool individually, that you start, of course, with what's in your control. So that's the easy things, or not easy, but the most likely that you have a bigger lever there. So the change of perspectives is a seemingly simple, but also powerful one-page exercise. You can do it on a piece of paper or digitally. And this is the individual version. You get the version for your group or for your team in a bit. One word of caution beforehand, before I explain the process in a few words. Especially the left part of this piece of paper, of this one-page exercise. It's the inside me part that can appear pretty hard in the beginning, especially when we are not that well-versed with reflection, or when we try to apply it in our business and we are more in a traditional organization where there might not be time for reflection, for example. So it's normal that this thing, if you think of it like a mental muscle exercise, that you get some sort of sore muscles, or that you think, whoa, this doesn't work, but you might try again and try again and try again if you would like to try, if it's for you. So how does it work, very briefly? One example. In the upper left corner, I wrote our context of this one exercise. We are now thinking about the challenge of, I want to have more free headspace. Imagine you're, for example, a tech leader or a software architect or a senior software engineer, and you have too much on your plate. And you would like to find a way to have more free headspace for the things that are important to you. Next, we take a look inside. Remember, the one-hand side, the left side, is about looking in your inside. And that's an exercise you do for you, so you are free to write down everything you have on your mind, because it's just for your eyes. So in that example, on the left side, in the upper corner, I would think about, why is having free headspace important to me? What's my ultimate goal? What's my metaphorically spoken compass? Where do I want to go, for example? And if you're a human being like me, and like most of us, you also usually have naturally stuff that pulls you away from your goals. Like, so to say, baggage. Beliefs, past experiences, negative experiences, emotions, stress, whatever. So for example, in that example, one thought could be, oh, if I go and prioritize hard, my boss might get angry because so far I have taken every project that he threw at me, for example. Or if I go and prioritize hard so that I have more free headspace, I might not get a raise, for example. Or what will my team think of me if I prioritize other work than, for example, teamwork? And there could be more stuff. So this is just an example. And you write the stuff down there. And after you've spent like 5 to 10 or 15 minutes, whatever you have at your hands at free time, we leave the one side of the paper, and with curiosity and kindness towards ourselves. And that can be pretty hard to like, oh, that's just the stuff my brain created and my experiences and my thinking. What we found on the left side, by looking inside us, we gently move on the other side of the paper of the exercise, where we think about the outside world, the behavior. What could others notice? What could others notice when I move closer to my compass, to my goals, to having more free headspace? And what am I maybe already doing when I'm thinking about it? For example, oh, maybe I'm already doing 10 minutes of focus time in the morning to get my brain ready for the workday. How about maybe I do 15 minutes of it, or 30 minutes of it? Or how about I do 30 minutes of focus time at the end of the day, or twice a week, or whatever? Or how about I ask my team if we could do prioritization together, or more of that, in order to have then more free headspace for other work? So writing some ideas down, what can you do, or what are you already doing to move closer to your compass? And in the fourth section, think about what could you do to really move away from your goals and from your compass? And what did you maybe already do to move away? For example, taking on that special extra project your boss comes around the corner with might take you away from your goals. So this is another piece of homework for you if you're interested in it. You get all the questions that are shown here and some more even in the PDF and in the templates you can try out for yourself to experiment with your very own challenges you have. Important part here is start with any challenge, no matter how small it might look like. And also it doesn't need to be perfect. Write stuff down on a piece of paper, on some digital device, wherever you can work best. I would recommend pen and paper over a digital device, but it doesn't matter so much if you do it. And try to experiment what is it doing for you. Try it for 1 or 2 or 3 challenges and see what's happening. And yes, you can also do it with your team, as I said, or with a group of people that have a common interest. The important part is when you want to do it with your team or with a group of people is you need to have enough trust in the team that you can work with these questions together and to think through them together. So some sort of mutual trust needs to be already there. And like for the solo version or for the individual version, the team and group version of the Change of Perspective Canvas needs practice. So here's the set of questions that's a bit different to guide a group of people through this thinking process from inside us as a team to outside of the team. And I even had people who came to me after I delivered the talk at other conferences that they said, oh, that would make a great retrospective format. And I even had some feedback that people tried it out as a retrospective. That could also be, if you have a challenging situation, that you can use that format somehow as a retrospective. And yes, for groups or for teams, that process is even a bit harder than the individual one. What makes it easier, though, is that you have practice, so that you have, for example, already practiced the solo one with your own challenges. Second thing that makes it easier is you have a moderator, a facilitator, somebody outside your team that guides us through the process, that watches the time, that holds the space, so to say. And the third thing that makes it easier, that you start with a seemingly easy challenge to practice together. Use, for example, a more tangible topic. Like in that example I showed before, in the circle of influence of that fictional team is, for example, shipping software sooner and also navigating conflict well. And if you have these 2 challenges, I would advise to start with shipping software, as this is more tangible to think through than the navigating conflict. And then talk about, why is that important for you as a team? What's your compass as a team in that challenge? What are you putting in your way forward as a team? What's your baggage, which beliefs and which experience you already made as a team that are getting in your way? And then think about the actionable behavior. How can you move a little closer? What could others notice that you're moving closer? And what away moves are you maybe already doing that you want to stop, for example? So with that, going to a little wrap up, these are the four mind skills for hard problems from today. There are more, but these are, in my point of view, the most essential ones. Reducing distractions, using the reflection canvas as an exercise for own challenges, circle of influence and visualization, and a change of perspective I showed just before. They are all applicable for you right now. You can dig deeper in all the materials as a homework, and at least 2 of them, the lower ones, can be also used with other people, with groups or with your teams. Share widely what you learned today. Share it with friends, share it with teammates, with your managers if you're not a manager yourself. I can also be booked, of course. I can help with that. I can even send more material to help you get started on your own. And don't forget that it starts with yourself. The impact starts with yourself. You need to practice also individually if you would like to make that little seed grow in your environment. You can use visualization and prioritization. You can work on your reflection skills, and you can change your perspective regularly. And of course, you have more impact together. So that is, include the people you work with or also that you work for. So the two I showed here work amazingly well with others. And the most important is that you start small, but you start soon. Use easy topics. No topic is too easy, really. And remember the almost obvious to reduce distractions, since we all pay with our attention. And with that, I thank you for spending attention here. That's all I have. And if there are questions, you can either start questioning these now or see me in the hallway track. Thank you.